Welcome to the Bill Cartwright Show with Steve Cohen. Our special guest today is Elk Grove alum and USF alum, Steve Gage. Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and see your lovely face.
See, Steve, he likes my face. Anyway, let's talk about you. And I know where you grew up, but talk about that.
Sure.
Growing up in Elk Grove. And what I'm particularly interested is your mom and dad and the long Gage Elk Grove connection. Talk about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was born in Sacramento. My parents lived there. My father had fought in World War II and came back on the VA bill, graduated as a instructor. He was an artist, so he taught art and taught at Elk Grove High School. And my mother was an elementary school teacher, 4th grade, and she worked at American Legion School in Sacramento. And they decided they wanted to get closer to where Dad's work was. So we moved to Elk Grove, which was at that time between 1,300 and 1,500 people, a little farming community about 15 miles south of Sacramento. And just to give you a perspective, Bill and I have watched Elk Grove turn into, it's nearly 200,000 in our lifetime. So it's no longer a little farm town. It's a suburb of Sacramento, soon becoming part of Sacramento. So yes, there is off of Elk Grove, the main street, the boulevard, there's a street called Gage Street. It's about 2.5 blocks long, and it was the driveway to a distant great uncle of mine who lived at the end of the road. The building is still there, but obviously he's long passed, and the Gage name is really just Gage Street now. So
I think I was reading a thing about the Gages being one of the first families in Elk Grove all the way back to the 1800s. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. It wasn't directly direct relatives, but they were like great uncles and great, that kind of off the main tree kind of a thing, but our name is there, so.
I'll go with that. So growing up in Elk Grove, tell me what kind of kid you were in high school and what were you thinking about?
Sure, it's interesting. I think about this as I love watching some of the old television shows, and I always think of the Andy Griffith Show and growing up in Mayberry, because little Ronnie Howard is the same age as I am. So when I watch him as a little boy, I realize the period of time in which he was acting in that TV series. And it was very much like that kind of town. There was no, people didn't lock their doors. We played out till late at night, and it was a very safe environment.
So as a high school kid, what in the world were you thinking about? Did you have an idea of what you were doing? Did you know?
When I was in 4th grade, a revelation came to me that kind of has changed the direction of my life at that time. I really felt the need to become or be involved in medicine. And so that became it all started with a Time magazine article when I was in 4th grade, arthritis surgery. And I took the pictures from our Time magazine and I cut them out, and I presented a paper in 4th grade, which, to the horror of my teacher, were these kind of gory surgical pictures. And but that was the direction I knew I wanted to go, and didn't do a whole lot going towards that while I was at school. I was just a kid, and I was filming at Elk Grove High School. When I was in junior high, I started filming the coaching football films. It was a 16 millimeter camera up on top of the press box, shooting film of the games so the coaches could make corrections and so forth. So that's how the coaches knew me. I didn't play sports. I was kind of going in a different direction at that time. And between my junior and senior year, Coach Dawson came to me and said, what are you going to do? You're almost a senior. I guess you're going to go into photography, which was, to my horror, I said, oh, absolutely not. I have no interest in photography. That's how you know me. But my interest is really, I want to become a doctor. I want to work in the operating room and so forth. And he kind of looked at me funny and he said, well, you know, that's really interesting that you bring that up. And he said, because there's a brand new thing. They've hired at Sacramento State University. They've hired a gentleman from Ohio State University, and he's doing this newfangled vocation called athletic training. And I said, oh, well, what is that? Nobody knew what athletic training was. And he said, well, it's according to this guy from Sac State, it's learning to take care of and prevent athletic injuries. Well, I'd never heard of such a thing. And he said, the great news is that none of the coaches want to do it. They want to coach. They don't want to do this. And they turned to me and said, Steve, is it something you'd like to do? Because he will train you on how to become an athletic trainer. And I just said, sign me up. So I started working with that individual. His name was Lou Crowell. He's quite a legend, certainly in Sacramento, because he started the whole process. And then he came up with an idea in which Saturdays would be, he opened up his physical therapy clinic, and he just took care of athletic injuries on Saturday from the night before Friday games, and set up this whole new center. Well, believe it or not, that was actually the very first of its kind in the entire United States, was in Sacramento, and I was a part of it. So my roots go very deep into that. I would discuss what I do with people, and they had no idea what that was about. So athletic training now, of course, is common in almost every high school and even younger. So it was the beginning of my career.
So talk about your physical training work while you were at Elk Grove High School, and then talk about how that eventually moved over to USF. Yeah,
so I really just had my senior year, and I was totally taken by this new ability to try to take an injured person and figure out what happened to them, what was the best treatment for them. It just came very easily to me because of my interest. And then I went, when I graduated, I became the trainer at a small junior college called Cosumnes River College, Junior College, and took care of their injuries. At the same time, I was doing most of the athletic events in Sacramento, the Pig Bowl, the Golden West Invitational track meet. There were judo tournaments and boxing tournaments, and they all needed somebody to assist them with their injuries. And so I went off and did that. Bill's coach, the basketball coach, Dan Risley, called me one day and said, are you doing that athletic training stuff still? And I said, well, yeah, I am. And he said, well, listen, I got this kid, and he's coming into the high school, and he's, 6'11", he's, maybe a little clumsy, and and I work him hard, but I don't want to hurt him. I think he's got a great future as an athlete, and I don't know how to take care of him, and I really would like your assistance. Well, at that time, I was at the college level working, and I wasn't that excited about going back to the high school, but Dan encouraged me and said, well, come and meet him. So the next day I went to the practice, and I met Bill for the first time. and we've been friends since. And I really enjoyed taking care of him. And so then I went on to another college, Sierra College here in the area.
What convinced you? I'm sorry, Steve. What convinced you to want to stay? You saw like, wow, this guy's got potential, and it's somebody I could make a difference.
You know, Bill's. I'll say this as I said it for the whole time I've known him. Bill's qualities are not about his height or his ability to play basketball. It's that warm, engaging person that he is. That's his greatest asset. It's not that he's 7 feet tall or that he can shoot a basketball. Those are things he kind of had to learn to do, and they came pretty easy to him. But it's the quality of the individual that I saw, and that's why I was so anxious to get started in working with him. So
you could tell that back then,
yes.
Even as a youngster,
as a young man,
a few years younger than you, and
yeah.
Do you remember what you said to him? Hi.
Yeah, I kind of stood up and looked up in the air and thought, wow, that's the biggest man that I've ever seen. And of course, through the years now, I've worked with all kinds of different athletes, and 7 feet's not that big. But again, his heart was bigger than his height. So that's what really, and I consider him a lifelong friend.
Well, and what you should know is that we were thrilled you were there, because before you were there, Dan was taping us, our coach, which was a nightmare. So we loved having you there.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's kind. Well, then, just a quick little story. Bill once came to me and said, this is while he was playing at Elk Grove High School, and he said, Steve, my foot is killing me. It's just, it really hurts. And back then there weren't, we didn't have Nikes and Converse and all. The only Converse we had were the, what were they?
Chuck Taylor's.
Chuck Taylor's, yeah.
Horrible
shoes. And anyway, I watched him for about a week. I started taping him. He was being very cautious because he knew he didn't want to interrupt his process in games and all of that. But it finally came to one game where he just at halftime said, I can't do it. It hurts way too much. And I just said, well, let me talk to the coach. So I went to Dan and I said, Dan, Bill can't do it. He's hurt. We can't play him. Of course, he accepted that. And that night we discovered a stress fracture in his foot. And then I basically worked with him just to kind of keep him in shape. He needed about 5 weeks, and didn't need to be casted. He didn't need surgery. It was just a stress fracture. But that was a fun time to kind of watch him recover from that, and he continued on his pathway of greatness that year.
Yeah, that was a fun year. I think that was my junior year.
Yeah.
And actually, we were okay because our other big guy, Terry, played great. I think he was happy I was gone because he got most of the shots.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so then Bill went off to University of San Francisco. That was always fun, walking into the gym when he was in high school and, meeting these great coaches that were coming to recruit him. He was obviously highly sought after, Digger Phelps and all of that from Notre Dame. And he picked USF, which I was very happy for him. And I was working up at Sierra College. And then the summer of his freshman year, and when I was working at the junior college, I got a call from Bob Gaylor, which is the athletic director and head coach at University of San Francisco. And he asked me a couple quick questions. He said that their trainer was going to the Oakland Raiders full time and that he needed somebody to take care of the players. And I'm just a student. I just kind of on the phone said, well, do you want me to try to help you find somebody? and he said, no, I want you. And I said, well, I'm just a student. You need somebody. No, we want you. So I ended up getting a scholarship to USF and enjoyed that year. That was the year that the team became #1 in the nation, and we were really undefeated until the last game in Notre Dame. So
that's amazing. Bill, do you remember that? You obviously, they probably asked your opinion and you said, yeah, don't hire him. And they did it anyway.
Well, Steve did a great job, or does a great job wherever he's at. But talk about your time at USF, because it was short, and talk about what you were thinking about after you left USF, and what your college years were like.
Yeah, I obviously I never in my imagination did I ever think I was going to get a scholarship and go to University of San Francisco, but it's a beautiful campus. It's a great school. Quite an experience for me, especially growing up in a little farm town, and just like Bill experienced. And all of a sudden we were #1 in the nation. We would, have people meeting us when we fly to different cities, and we were on the radar big time at that time. And it was a bit overwhelming to me. In fact, we had the #1 soccer NCAA soccer championship. We had volleyball going on. We had baseball going on, and quite honestly, I never got to go to class very much. It seemed like I was constantly trying to take care of these athletes. So I wasn't really accomplishing what I wanted to do there, except get a lot of experience in athletic training and injuries, which was very valuable to me. But I still had a very burning desire to be on the clinical side of these things. And I had again, from early age, I wanted to be in the operating room. And so left USF prematurely. I probably should have stayed and finished everything up there, but I was young and not thinking the way that you do with the years of experience, but ended up working in the operating room for about 11 years at a hospital in Sacramento called Mercy General, where we did a lot of orthopedics. And then I went into the orthopedic implant business from there. So that's where I've been since.
Steve, talk about what led you to work in the hospital for 11 years, and then talk about that orthopedic area and how it's grown.
Yes, of course, this was now in the late 70s. And you have to remember that modern joint replacement, which I basically have been involved with the most through my career, joint replacement, it started in the 60s, early 60s, and now we're in the later 70s. So we were still kind of trying to figure out how to replace hips and how to replace knees. There was still a lot of advancement in trauma products, broken legs, car accidents, such. And I always had a real hunger for being there and learning as much as I could. And I got a perfect position at Mercy, where I was being cross-trained in all of the procedures, everything but cardiac and OB, which they didn't really do there. So every day was a learning experience, and really appreciate it. And it prepared me to the point where I am now. I'm thinking about retirement in the next 10 years, and it's all been around orthopedic surgery. So
talk about these different surgeries. For one thing, to be able to replace a knee, to be able to replace a hip. What makes a surgery really successful, and what makes it not so great?
Yeah. Well, again, starting back when I first was, in the late 70s, they still hadn't figured out exactly how to. They knew they wanted to use metal. They knew they wanted to use plastic. They knew they wanted it kind of in this shape, and they wanted it with cement or wanted it without cement. And through the decades of advancement, again, through positive results and through negative results, we finally have figured out kind of what works. And now when I first started, joints were lasting 5 to 10 years. Now they are well in excess of 20, and we're getting close to 30 years of success. And that's really important, because joint replacement is generally done in people that are 60 or older. And that's not a hard line, that's just an average. And so if we can get 30 years, we get them through their 80s and 90s, they get one replacement, and that's all they really need. That's the goal, is to have a replacement that lasts for the rest of their life and not have to be changed. So there's been all kinds of changes, but nowadays implants look very, very similar. We've figured out the shape, the materials, and all of that. Now we're getting into the true science, the true artwork, and that is the orthopedic surgeon and his ability to realign knees and hips and replace them with these artificial materials. And it's basically through experience that, people say, do you guys make the best implants? No, we make the same level of implants as anyone else does. It's really trusting your surgeon and his experience and his ability intraoperatively to get the best results for you.
Athletes through real trauma or just they wear out their parts.
Yeah.
So for the common Joe, if there is one, what's the most common 2 replacement parts? Is it a hip? Is it a knee? What is it?
Yeah, right now, it's about 2 to 1 knees over hips. Knees are a little more difficult for patients. There's a very difficult regimen that they have to do to get through their recovery. Hips are much faster healing. Pain relief for both of them is almost immediate, except for the insult in which the incision was done. In other words, the approach of going through tissues to get down to the joint, that's always going to hurt. We can't really change that. But the deep bony pain that they feel from degenerative knee disease is gone almost immediately. They wake up and they can move their joints even just a little bit, and they realize they've lost that deep, excruciating pain of bone on bone. And so it's very rewarding. I just recently, in the past few years, got a little involved with some where I actually was looking at patients post-operatively, and kind of understanding what patients went through. When you're in the operating room, you see them for an hour or two and off they go home, and you don't really get a chance to discuss with them their outcomes.
So how do you make a knee like that? Let's say, for example, like for my knee, a guy that's 7 foot tall, and I am a little knock-kneed.
Yeah.
And as opposed to yourself.
Yeah.
So do you guys you'll make that knee yourself?
Well, this is kind of what an implant looks like. This is a material called cobalt chrome. It's extremely hard. It's a bit heavy, but its strength and its ability to have low resistance against plastic, because it's going to have to rub up against plastic, something like this. This is the lower leg, would be where this white material, and this would be the upper leg. And so it has to articulate smoothly without wear. And this is exactly when you talk about knock knees and not, we call that varus and valgus knees. A knock-kneed person would have a valgus deformity, and a person that is bow-legged has a varus deformity. And part of the procedure for the majority of surgeons is to get your legs straight again, because you didn't start with the amount of varus or valgus. It happens over time. It worsens over time, let's say. Now, there is a surgeon here in Sacramento who's basically saying we shouldn't be straightening their legs, and he's had some fantastic results, and it may be the future. But right now, the majority of surgeons are just trying to get your leg back as straight as possible, and patients like that.
So if one leg was straight, wouldn't you have to do the other?
No, not necessarily. People don't really notice that. It looks kind of funny, but to be you're going to have one. If you do one side, you have one that's painless. The pain has been removed, and you have a sore one on the other side. So,
tell me, have you had somebody with a bad knee or bad hip, and there was some question whether you can get them back to healthy? Now, don't tell me a bad story. Now, tell me a story where that has happened, and you were, and maybe the doctors were also surprised.
Yeah. They're again, they're usually pretty, as long as there's some basic rules that we follow, and that's how much correction we do, how much straighter we make them or not, is a big factor. But the expert, the guy in surgery that's doing it, he's going to fit it appropriately and balance the ligaments. Now, that's something we haven't talked about, but has always been a big part in all of orthopedics, is we think of orthopedics as being bones and bones. But quite honestly, these procedures are being perceived much more as soft tissue procedures, meaning like the ligaments and the tendons and the musculature around these joints have a very important role in how successful they're going to be and how much comfort or discomfort is brought to the patient by it. So we're constantly, although we're removing bone and we're replacing the ends of the bone with metal and plastic, if we don't balance it correctly with the soft tissues, again, it's that knee has been in that position for 60 years. We've got to correct it and be exactly aligned as basically God put you.
So what's next? What's next? What's the next step for?
Yeah, the improvement will be, of course, looking deep into the future. There's a biological solution will be the best, meaning can we get stem cells to recreate and reproduce hyaline cartilage, so that basically we don't use metal and plastic. We actually let the body heal itself. We're still quite a ways away, but that basically would be the future. We're seeing a lot of wonderful things with stem cells and PRP and all kinds of clinical stuff. But of course, that would be the best. If we could teach the body to replace the damaged bone with a cartilage-covered bone, that would be the best. But we still have some time before that's going to happen. So improving joint replacement, where we actually are still going to be using these materials, robotics has become very popular, where we use a robotic arm to make more precision in the cuts of the bone. And there are some other types of technology, but technology, as always, ends up dominating. So,
aren't they using stem cells right now over in Europe?
Yes, they are, and some surgeons are doing it here also. It's not approved by the FDA, still considered investigational, and there are some good results coming out of it. But the secret of getting it to be the best solution, not there yet.
Stevie?
Yes.
I think, you've had an amazing career, Steve, and you watched like things become so, just how technology has just become so amazing over all these years. And what are some of the biggest changes you've seen, from 30 years ago till now? Does it seem like the prehistoric Gage when you were first started?
Yeah, it was kind of like we were reaching for what the real solution would be. And, 20 years later, 25 years later or more, we've kind of narrowed. There's been some crazy ideas out there and everybody's tried it. We finally have come to where we're all now in agreement. There's probably 15 manufacturers in the world that do joint replacement. And you'd find it very difficult to see a difference between one over another. We've narrowed these things down, and we now know what works and we now know what doesn't work. So it's a combination of materials, the implants themselves, and again, the technique and the processes we use to prepare for seeding those implants.
Steve, talk about yourself right now. Are you ready to retire right off into the sunset, or do you have some other ideas, some other thoughts?
Well, that's very interesting. Yes, I'm at the age where I've got to start thinking about that stuff. And but I've just recently, since May, this company that I have worked for 15 years, was purchased by a healthcare organization in India called Shalaby. And it's basically an orthopedic surgeon who's been practicing for many years in India, who started with a small little four-room OR hospital in India, and now owns 11 hospitals and does 10,000 joints a year. And he's a guy that's become very successful. He's very well known in India. And one of the things that he always wanted was he wanted to understand and experience manufacturing. He always wanted kind of like, I wish someday I could have my own implant company. Well, he does, and it's us. And it's a wonderful story, wonderful guy to be with. He's a reserved younger man, and we now are being owned and controlled by a healthcare organization. I don't know that there is another company that does what we do that is actually owned by a healthcare organization. So the financial side is very rewarding. He wants us to take this and carry it as far as we can go, as much as we can do. So as I'm thinking about ending my career, all of a sudden a new opportunity where the future is before me, I don't see myself retiring in the near future. This is so exciting.
I understand. I'm not retiring either. Steve, talk about your family.
Okay. Yeah, I have two older brothers. The oldest passed away about a year ago. My middle brother, I'm very close to. I speak to him almost every day. They both lived in Portland. Glenn still lives in Portland, and I'm very, very close. My parents and my aunt and uncle really nurtured that family was important, and the cousins, all of the kids from that relation, from those that generation, all still maintain contact with each other. I do Zoom calls at least once a month with all of us. We're very, very close. We love each other immensely, but we're all getting older, and the numbers are starting to decrease. But we all support each other.
Talk about your boys.
Yeah, I have a stepson and a natural son. My stepson is a chef trained in San Francisco, and he's now chefing at the University of California, Davis. He has gone through a great deal of recovery. He's going to stay out of the restaurants. The demand and the temptations are too great there. He's a superb chef. He's worked with all the greats, and I'm very, very proud of him, especially for overcoming the obstacles that he's had to. And my natural son is Tyler, and he is 31 years old and is in real estate and a couple of other businesses that he runs. Love them both immensely. We have dinner together once a month, and I'm very, very proud of my boys.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being on the show. You know, I still remember your dad's car. We love that car, man.
The Mercedes?
It was a Mercedes SL.
190 SL, yeah.
Beautiful. And I still remember him cruising that car. It's too bad now. How could you let him? How can you not have that car?
Well, I think it was long after I was out of the house that that happened. But yeah, the best part about that car was I used to be able to, that was kind of my dating mobile. The girls loved it too. So.
Oh yeah, that was pretty phenomenal. But I'll always remember that you and Ray Risley, Coach's son, it was a newer car, but it was pretty big time with those guys. But
with the society and the social issues that are happening, with Black Lives Matters and so forth, it's made me think a lot about growing up in a little town where there weren't a lot of African Americans, and in my high school there wasn't a great deal of African Americans. The first one that I actually had a class was actually Bill's older sister, Pat, and tried to become friends with her, and she was a wonderful young lady. But my first and closest friend that was African American was Bill. He influenced me so much in that. So
we just need to get you out more. That's all. Once we could do that, all I need to do is invite you over to my house. My dad would have not let you out of there.
Yeah.
He definitely wanted to
He
have a
was a good
chat with
talker.
you. Still is.
He still is, yeah.
But Steve, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Awesome.
Nice meeting you, Steve.
Same here, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and good luck with everything. And congrats.
Thank you.
on
Thank
everything.
you so much.